As usual, I'll begin with some thanks. So, Sarit, thank you for the opportunity. And to the speakers, thank you for coming, and to our guests as well. I tried to think over the last few days about the importance of this session, this panel. I tried to think about the importance of this panel. And at Alma, we've always had two topics. The first, which clouds everything else, is the security aspect, which is why we began with it, and we'll go back to it as well later on. But right now, let's talk about the civil aspect. It's something we've always touched upon. The different communities in the Galilee, living up north. And I tried to think, what is it expressed by? How does it manifest? How has it manifested in the last 7 months and counting? And in a conversation with one of the guests here, I'm not going to disclose who, he asked, has anyone, is he going to send a location on Waze? And I kind of smirked, and it didn't take him long, and then he said, oh wait, it doesn't work where you live. And again, was it on the news? On the night that Miri talked about, and in central Israel, suddenly Waze didn't work. Well, wake up, good morning. We haven't had Waze since I returned home sometime in September after a month. And really, this transparency, the fact that we in the north feel transparent, is something that people don't hear about, and that's what we want to focus on today. And when I talked to our panelists, we have 2 women and 1 man, I tried to think about what we'll talk about. So we have 3 women and 1 man. And one of the misconceptions about the North is that there's the matter of the North. It's the story of the North. And this is what the panel is going to bring. But there's not just one story. My story here in the southern part of the Golan Heights is not similar after I have gotten back, after a month of reserve duty. And I discovered that I don't live in a moshav, I live in an outpost, in a base, with some Golani, and with soldiers, and all these different equipment, and all these fortified posts. And my story is not similar. But southern Golan Heights to Nimrod's story and their threats in the northern part of the Golan Heights. Even these 2 very close circles, Sha'ar Yishuv, which has been evacuated, is not similar to Sde Nehemiah, which is probably completely open and everything is fine there. And Idmit, which on October 8th have already rapidly left and ran away, if I may say so, in order to not get hurt, is not the same as the story of Tarshicha. And really, I don't know if Sarit has planned this. I'm going to give her the credit that it was planned, but it's a whole range of stories, a diversity of stories. And Tal, who will be introduced first, the question that I found difficult to answer, and I asked her to introduce herself, please, so that we'll all know what to say. And the question we couldn't answer was very basic. Tal, where do you live? So I'll introduce you and I'll give you a few minutes. This panel is full of people, and therefore we won't have time afterwards to sit and ask questions. So you can all come up to us later after the panel and ask the panelists any questions you want. Tal is from the Western Galilee. Let's begin with that, then she'll talk about the rest. And she will introduce the story of relocation, which is a lovely word for what is going on here, and how the community broke down and how it's being rebuilt. And that's an amazing point that I think Inas will also be talking about, maybe more optimistically, unlike Gideon Lilach, which I'm assuming will be less optimistic. But it's not just a matter of talking about the problems, it's a matter of understanding where we're headed, how we can rebuild from it. So Tal Lavi, the floor is yours. Well, nice to meet you. As you so well introduced me, I'm from Adamit. I'm Tal, I'm 49, I'm married, I have 3 children. 22 years old, who just finished her IDF service. Ori, who is drafting to the IDF in November, she's going to be a combat soldier, and Doron, who's 15 and a half. We did not run away. We've been evacuated on October 8th. We were asked to pack our bags by the head of the council, the mayor, Moshe Davidovich. Until October 7th, I think what I did for a living was to bring the good, the beautiful in Western Galilee. I brought bloggers and opinion shapers to tour the Galilee, and I completely ignored the fact that I was 500 meters away from the border. It wasn't even something that I thought about. I don't think that I would have been able to bring people all the way to the illustrated walls and to explain to them how to jump and how to take a picture of it on the iPhone. My project is called The Galilee is a Story, and it really is the story of the evacuation. It is like an evacuation in order to rebuild. That sounds kind of right wing, but as we've said, we're a family. We have 3 older children, and they ask older children's questions and they want the answers to them. We woke up on October 7th, a tense, volatile Shabbat. We woke up a Saturday morning. We sat in the living room, and there were windows all around us. There was light streaming in from the windows, blue skies, and until the day before, it was the most beautiful thing I had at home, these big windows. And my boys and my girl were looking at me, and they said, "What's the difference between the south and the north? Our house is just completely full of windows. It's so easy to break these windows." And my children were afraid. And we went into the safe room. It's my eldest's room, and we realized we couldn't lock the safe room, and we never thought about that. And even though we're on the border, we never thought of this possibility. So we went back to the living room, and for the first time, my children showed to me, they exhibited a difficulty, and I couldn't give them a solution. And I knew that we would overcome, but they had to hear the truth from me. A month before then, I was still the spokesperson of one of the local councils in the Western Galilee cluster. And I was sitting on an exercise. I knew what this meant, and I said, "Listen, if tomorrow morning Moshe Davidovich tells us to pack our bags and to go to grandma's, it means that we have to do that." And they said, "What do you mean?" When they said, "What do they mean?" And I said, "Well, it means it's wartime." And they asked me to prepare the bags and to pack a bag for 72 hours. That's what we were asked to do. Get a bag together for 72 hours, and that's how we left on October 8th. So if you're asking me where I live, on October 8th, I live in Givat Elah. This is where my mother lives. And we sat on a gallery level, and there were 7 of us. It was amazing. It was beautiful. The Ramat David aircraft made it a bit difficult for us, but we managed to pass the time. And then we had an online Zoom call from my community, the Adamit Kibbutz community. And the emergency authority on October 16th already evacuated us officially. And after we were spread out across the country, we were asked to reconvene, to gather once again. So my children were the first. They went to the Guy Beach Hotel in Tiberias, and that's where they were. I have a 14-and-a-half-year-old, as I've said, and I and my husband got there, and for 3 days we couldn't live with the children. We left our dog in Givat Elah, and there was no room in the hotel for us to sleep with our children. And from that moment on, all my stress amounted, because a 14-and-a-half-year-old boy can't sleep without his mother. And I remember the home front command calling me up. They knew me by my name. They said, "Tal, we'll take care of it. There's no hotel room. Do you want to sleep 5 in one room?" And I haven't told you something very important. When we on October 7th were still home, the day before we were evacuated, Oren, my husband, he is in security. So I was evacuated, and he's also in part of the defense enterprise. And he said, "What if something happens? I have to become part of the rapid response unit." And I said, "Of course, there's no question about it." And at the same time, I realized that I now have to protect our house with the big blue explosive windows. And I said, "Wait 1 minute." I took him to the bedroom, and I said, "Please show me how to use your civil weapon." And I had chills then and I have chills now, and I will ultimately tell you what I want to happen in this very crazy situation. So in the Guy Beach Hotel, we all got together, 500 residents from all areas in up north, and we usually see one another in tourist events. And I see some tourists also here. We go to Rosh Hanikra, we go to all various other events, we meet one another, and you see suddenly 500 people with wearied eyes, worried, wary, not knowing what to do. And maybe it's just like a small band-aid for the first aid that we got at the beginning, but after a month, when you already know what 500 families are going through, because the family therapy is happening in the corridors, you see it, you feel the pain, you live through it. It is a wounded community, and we decided that it was time for us to start thinking about something healthier. Imagine, it is so polarized. This really is the reality of the evacuees. You wake up in the morning, my husband goes to work, and at night he didn't come back to the hotel. So I had to go up to Kibbutz Gazit, and I was looking for somewhere to sleep. And I went to my brother-in-law, and this is how things happened from one day to the next. And in the morning, we got to a room. We now live in a room that belongs to a soldier. And admit, I have a 220-meter apartment with big blue windows and the most beautiful view ever, which is so much more than just a military base now. And now we have a one single bedroom apartment. And I told the kids, we'll be back. We left rapidly, and I still had a minute to take a snapshot, to take a picture. And after we got the bracelet, we took it off. And this is our one-bedroom apartment. And my 14-and-a-half-year-old son didn't have a bedroom next to mine. He now lives 3 streets away from me. A kid on his own. But that's life. And this is my son Omer. This is my daughter Omer, who is a fighter. She is a combat soldier. She was very operative. I love that she really helped me because I'm so sensitive. And we wondered how we could furnish 2 empty apartments. And she also realized she can't stay in Gazit. So the matter of just healing the situation meant that from a 220-meter apartment, we now have 3 different houses, one in Kfar Bialik and 2 in Gazit. And my daughter Ori told me that she is going to keep studying in Manor Kaba. She was to finish her matriculation exams, her high school diploma, and I gave her all the support I could, and I told her everything that needs to happen will happen. Even if it means I don't have a car, you can take the car so you can travel. And Ori now lives with Omer. She's 17 and a half, and she's not living with me in the same house. Yesterday, my sister got married, and I stand here. And yesterday morning, I was also working, and my daughters were asking, "It's your sister's wedding day. What are you doing here?" What am I doing here? I am doing exactly that. It's the polarity between having evacuees giving us up and telling us to go and exercise, and that heals us a little bit. But then you go back home, and it's an empty house. It's peeling. This is what it looks like. This is the kitchen. This is me. My feet are in the kitchen, and you can see the living room. But look how beautiful this kibbutz is. And when I look at the horizon, it's a healthy community. I don't know why I'm stressed. And they really embrace me. They have welcomed me. And there are other projects that have also embraced us. This is the vegetable project. And I realized that this is my time now that all my kids have apartments and we have something to eat, because there's also a dining hall. And if I can't make it because I have a meeting in Tel Aviv, and I started to get to communication, I realized that our transparent story can't remain transparent. It just cannot. It's so hard. My sister got married yesterday, and my dress remained in Lebanon. It's not in Adamit, it's in Lebanon. And I had to make do. And I'm relocating, right? On relocation, you don't know where your hairdresser is, you don't know where to do your nails, you don't know where to go find a clinic if you need a doctor. But listen to my son. When I ask him, "How are you, Doron?" he says, "Great. I'm happy in Kfar Tavor. We live in Gazit, and he's in Kaduri school and his friends." And then the council calls me up and says, "What are your plans for September 1st?" And I said, "What are your plans for September 1st?" We are here at present. And what about what is he going to study next year? Well, we went back to Kaduri school. That's where he is now. That's where we're planning on being next year. I come out the next day. I only have 1 minute. Wow. Okay, I'll do this very quickly. I'll talk of this last minute about building because maybe you heard about many evacuees stories, and unfortunately, we have people in the south and it's really wounded. We have been evacuated on time, so thank you for that. But we or I, you know, if you have something to eat and you have a place to sleep, wait, you can breathe and move on. So fortunately, two NGOs, Galila and Psefas Galil Mosaic, we have projects for evacuees because I was not compensated. I was working at an office and I was not compensated. I didn't wait for the government. I wanted to start working. I wanted to be back on stage. I wanted to start helping people. Business women, that's what I do now. I meet business women who have been evacuated in Tiberias, also online, and I even go back and do story workshops in the Enharod Museum and in Tarshiha, Inas. Do you recognize the picture from Tarshiha? And let me wrap up by saying what was going to happen on the day after. In the tourism, you said, well, when did they find out that we don't have a GPS in Tel Aviv? Only when the Iranians struck. And they asked me, are you going to go back to Adamit 500 meters away from the border? I don't know. I don't have an answer. I can't even give my children the answer to this question. But I can say that I don't want to wake up on October 7th, God forbid, to a matter of being kidnapped because I don't know what will happen. I don't know whether it'll be any different. I don't want to use the gun that I asked my husband to explain to me how to use. Can you see us here? This is in Kalkalist newspaper. We're always looking toward the horizon. We're always leaning on nature around us. We know we're resilient, but we don't always want to rely on ourselves. We want to have the directorate telling us what's going to happen moving forward. So here you see us. This is our view. This is Adamit Park. This is the Tavor Mountain. I would really like to thank you so much and to use or be helped by you. Please communicate our story. Think about it. We have families that are broken, that are split up. The matter that we get money, well, that's just the first stage in the theory of needs. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tal. Really, when we look ahead, Tal relayed the demand to the top. Some of it comes from the bottom. And Inas, whom I'm going to invite now, is a friend of Alma. She's a resident of Tarshiha. I'd like to invite you to take the floor and speak about the future. Hello, everybody, all of the dignitaries here, journalists, writers, security forces, and everybody who works for the work on the mines for a better future. I'm here, excited. I represent the abandoned, forgotten Galilee. This has happened since October 7th. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Ms. Sarit Zahavi, the founder and president of Alma Center, and the entire great Alma team. Let me give you some background about myself. 44 years ago, I was born in Nazareth, next to the church. I'm the firstborn of my parents. I came to the world full of love and giving to others. I was educated by the nuns during my 12 years of school. I knew deeply that as the firstborn, it is my mission and my responsibility to give the following generations, the value that is values based on love and accepting others. And based on this, I completed my academic studies, and then I moved to the Galilee 20 or so years ago. It was a very serious move from the city into the village. Like everything else I've done in my life, here too, I did this alone and I was determined. Whenever I saw an opportunity to contribute based on my values that were given to me, I didn't stop to look for the unifying place that brings people together. So I'm here to talk to you about the Galilee after October 7th. On October 7th, I woke up at 8:30 in the morning, allowing myself to get up a little bit later on my free day. I could not understand what I was seeing. It took me time to understand that we are in the midst of an existential war. The Galilee was attacked, and the resolution that was adopted was to evacuate population in the north up to 3.5 kilometers. In this context, about 61,800 residents were evacuated, of which 16% uh, of these communities decided to stay in their places, such as Khofesh and Fasuta. Were too scared to leave their homes because they was scared that they wouldn't be brought back, like happened in Kfar Bara in the past. So what happened in these villages, in the ones that are close to them? Not enough shelters because of negligence. There was also a construction crisis, not enough infrastructures, and additionally, old buildings that were not in good working order. Around Malot Tarshiha, it was also difficult and complicated, especially when the immigrants came. A lot of houses were built in Malot without giving regard to protected spaces. Many people were recruited to reserve duty. Things were suspended. No more tourism, no more visitors. The Galilee was attacked. Many soldiers were called up urgently from all over the country, and this harmed the community resilience. As I stand here, it is very important for me to address a survey that was prepared, that was done by Dr. Adam Assad and Yaron Kappel. And this survey shows optimistic data. 56% agree with what Mansour Abbas said, according to which, that's more than half, according to which the Hamas attack on October 7th does not reflect the Arab society and the values of Islam. The best figure that was published is that 86.5% support helping the civilian effort during the war, and 71% don't feel comfortable to express themselves freely on social networks. At the same time, 84% are worried about their personal safety for the reasons that I mentioned, and 86% are concerned about their economic security and also their physical safety. This is the data. I will talk about it in a second. I will talk about these data, and I'll give some tangible examples of things that happened. It's important for me, and I stand here and I'm moved every time I talk about this issue in my capacity as a community coordinator of the emergency teams of the Druzen and Circassian sector. I handle emergencies in the north, and these two pictures are two graduates that we lost in the war, both of them from Khofesh, and they're both so dear to me. Dealing with bereavement and mourning and community resilience. What you see here, you can see several photographs here. These are photos that were taken in various schools. This is from the Pki'in school of Jamal Abbas. His mother is a colleague and a friend. We lost him in the war in Gaza. And here you can see reinforcing the resilience of the educational teams in the entire region. After October 7th, I was called urgently to Khofesh as the coordinator in charge of the emergency teams, and from there I moved on to make packages together with the youth leaders and volunteers. Each day that passed, I felt a lot of satisfaction despite the tremendous pain. Suddenly, I was among big groups that wanted to help and requests for support. Plans were made to strengthen resilience of the community and personal resilience. The program that was put together was for the entire community and especially the educational teams and the students. Special workshops were run for the teachers. It's important to mention that many NGOs donated. Mashabim NGO in the north donated. We got a lot of resources in the north, and also many women from nearby villages at this time had difficulties. They were fearful and they felt abandoned, especially after many men were called up in emergency call up orders and were not around. There were a lot of collaborations in these villages. For example, for Suta and Ilia, there are no Christian villages that hosted and gave a lot to the soldiers. There was also a project on behalf of the embassy. Gifts were given to the Fasulta children during Christmas, and that strengthened the ties between these communities. Uh, Leadership that brings people together. What is the future of that? I'm very proud of being part of these through NGOs. As I mentioned, I will talk about the Hakiat NGO. Before I begin to describe the enterprises in the north, I will address the research. 86.5%, a very large majority, have supported, participating, and contributing to the community. Hakiat was established 3 years ago by Dorit Kraus from Kfar Vradim. We meet 3 times a month. The group has women from all sectors. During the war, there was a partial regression. We worked hard to strengthen the ties and the society fabric. There were several projects to do this during the war. This month we opened a new branch in Tefen after there was a lot of demand from women in the area. There is a mutual response. This is a mutual responsibility group. They would transport things and we also iron things for people. This was established by a righteous man, Kobi. We helped needy families in 3 adjacent villages. We transported hot meals to them, food that was left over from the soldiers. We transported it to them. We didn't want to throw the food out. We wanted to find a way to give it out to people who want it and need it. And here, this is what I wanted to say about mutual responsibility as something that makes Israeli society stronger. I will finish off here, but I cannot complete my words without standing here and expressing prayer for all of the hostages to come home and all the families to come back, all the soldiers to come back to their families, and may we meet again in happier circumstances. Thank you very much, Inas. Let me invite Efrat. She's a resident of Sde Nehemiah. Again, from the variety that you hear here, you'll see each of us has different challenges, different stories. Sarit mentioned my 8 children. I have all ages, but some families, other families don't know about uh, childcare or about children going to high school. Uh, the next speaker, is one of the leaders of 1701. This is one of the organizations that began to put these problems on the table very early. Efrat, please, you're invited to speak.
Hello, and thank you to Alma Center for inviting me and for this fascinating day. I don't know if I'm more anxious now or less anxious now after having seen all the data brought by the speakers before me, but that's for later. So let me introduce myself briefly in case you don't know, so you know where my background is and where I come from. Attorney Efrat Eldan Shechter. I live in Kibbutz De Nehemiah in the Upper Galilee. I was born and I grew up in Kiryat Shmona. I'm from a bereaved family. My uncle was killed when a Katyusha hit in Kiryat Shmona in the late 1960s. And when I was a child, it happened many years before I was born, but wasn't really aware of it. But now I understand what this means. This generational transfer is certainly what's happening to me. And I am active at Lobby 1701. I'll tell you a little bit about this lobby, even though it's not the matter at hand, just so that you know the background. I connect to and I agree with what was said before about the October 7th morning. It's really become part of us and we'll never ever forget it. But for us, living in the north, living on the conflict zone, this day was very important for those who understood what was happening because we live on the border. And I just want to tell you my small story, what happened to me that morning. I woke up very early that morning. I wake up very early in the morning. I managed to go over all the news, and I cook and I do laundry. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, everything is ready. But that morning it was a holiday, a Jewish holiday, and I could see the online reports from the south. And when I saw these white vans going into Sderot, and when very early in the morning the unofficial media channels brought rumors of what's happening in the south, I became very anxious, and I was sure that any minute it was going to start in the north as well. And I was also affected by the events marking 50 years to the Yom Kippur War. I saw the movie Golda and other TV series, and I was sure it was on the way to us. So very early on, at 8:30 in the morning, I woke up all my family members who were sleeping in, and we were wondering what to do. But at 10 a.m., we were already in the car with our bags packed on the way to central Israel to family, because I was sure that it was going to start in the north any minute. And as we all know, not the exact threat scenario we thought, but the war up north definitely did start. So just very briefly about Lobby 1701. Again, I don't want to elaborate too much on it because it's not the topic I was asked to speak about. But just so that you know, Lobby 1701 is a civil organization. It's apolitical. It's Western and Upper Galilee residents, Kiryat Shmona, Shlomi, the kibbutzim and moshavim, all those who have been evacuated and those who have not been evacuated, who come together in order to represent the northern residents. And the lobby was set up because of what happened after October 7th in the north. The fact that families have been evacuated, that the residents are part of the rapid response units locally for the last 7 months. Residents have both evacuated and unevacuated localities, and we wanted to make ourselves heard to reflect what is happening in the north, because unfortunately not too many people in Israel really know what's happening. Many people stop, and I have to say that ministers and members of Knesset who wanted to come and visit have come and went all the way up north, but some don't go past the Amiad junction because the security of the Knesset doesn't always allow us to come all the way to us. And that's how we started working. We carry out all sorts of activities. We go to the media, we go to the new security belt, and we make information accessible. We issue a daily and monthly targeting report or attack report to reflect this. We also are active in the Knesset vis-a-vis ministers and members of Knesset. We have the North Restoration lobby set up by Efrat Reitan, member of Knesset Efrat Reitan, and MK Michael Biton. And we do a lot on the media, Israeli media, world media, because it's important for us as residents of the North to establish the case so that people understand what's happening here, so that if there will be any action, we will be able to start public diplomacy and provide legitimization so that everyone will understand what's happening and why it's happening and understand our situation. So that's just a little bit about the lobby. And just on a personal note, I want to say that the lobby gives me space or a safe place to be active in, to feel like I'm doing something and to leave fear, anxiety and paralysis behind, which we've all been experiencing since October 7th. So on October 16th, the IDF evacuated the border communities up to 2 kilometers away from the border in an initiated step. And then there was also a government resolution that was decided by then, and the reason for the evacuation was because the welfare and of the community and the supply of products and basic services will not be able to be provided unless it is evacuated. And even though this was a government resolution, the Ministry of Defense did not evacuate 8 communities that were part of the resolution. And in addition to that, the government resolution about the evacuation was not very consistent. It didn't align with the border, with what we saw as the conflict zone, because not being evacuated and being 6 kilometers away from the border, we're still part of the conflict zone. And it's unclear what the rationale is, because the rationale wasn't actually acted upon. We can't have a normal routine either. So if that's the reason why the communities were evacuated, what about us? Sorry, I couldn't hear the question, but she said she's feeling ambivalent. I'm saying I'm grateful that we are where we are, but you'll soon understand what situation we're in. And by the way, this government resolution also is inconsistent with the Home Front Command directives that apply to this area. This is my kibbutz, Den Nehemiah. This is part of the Home Front app, and it says that we don't have a minute and a half when we have a warning, when we have it's immediate. As soon as we heard the boom, we only then hear the siren. Educational activities cannot be held in schools and regular classrooms, only in a place where you can be in a safe room quickly. And let me just say, because I can speak for an hour about our situation and explain, but I want to focus on several key points. The most important thing for me as a mother of 3 young children is where I believe it's going to be a problem for the long term is education. As Janusz Korczak said, if you worry about the days, you sow wheat, but if you want to talk about generations, you have to educate people. And in some of the unevacuated communities, we don't have any education facilities for 0 to 3 years old, and that's why many of the young families are not in the community. In elementary and high school, we do send our kids to school, but it's very limited. For the first month after October 7th, we only had Zoom once or twice a week with a teacher for an hour. After Hanukkah, around December, until December, it was we could only be in underground shelters, which obviously is not good conditions, in heterogeneous classrooms, various age groups together. And at present, the kids study 4 hours a week in high school. 4 hours a day, the speaker corrects. And in elementary school, 5 hours a day. For me as a mother, this really is detrimental to my children and their education. We've just heard several days ago, I don't want to go into politics, but we just heard a few days ago, we were told that what's September 1st? Why is everyone talking about September 1st? If you don't understand what September 1st is and what it represents to parents and families, it just doesn't understand what's happening. Right now, families up north, evacuated or non-evacuated, are talking about September 1st, and we're looking at what's happening at September 1st to determine where to live. Should they stay where they are? Should they go back home? And many families are leaving the north, and you must understand that, and they are living elsewhere. How much longer have I got? No more time. Okay. So I just want to say one more thing. I've only touched upon education, which I think is the most important, but there's also economic impact, negative impact on the communities that have not been evacuated and do not get the support that evacuated communities have been given. It sounds like very little, but it means a lot because businesses are ruined, families are ruined, and there's no compensation. The government is ignoring us. The state is ignoring us, and what we feel like is that we are being just left to our own devices. And to us, our lives, even in communities that have not been evacuated, have stopped since October 7th. And if the government won't do anything to help us, the north will remain desolate. And because Aaron Sher has died recently, he was the defenders at Tel Chai, what we could do today easily will be very difficult for us to do tomorrow. So don't leave us alone on our own. Thank you. It's very difficult to only be giving the case and not doing more. Lilach, if you could please come up to the podium now. Lilach is an officer in the past, and she's also a coordinator of the civil security at present. And if we can have the map up, it'll be good for Lilach as well. I think that I'll be the most optimistic of the bunch ultimately. My name is Lilach. I was an officer and I am now a member of the Forum of Dvorah Forum, and I'm a friend of Sarit. I was born in a kibbutz on the north to parents who founded Kiryat Shmona and then moved to a kibbutz in the Upper Galilee. I went to the central Israel, and then I came back and I founded together with my friend a small moshav by the Hermon mountain. And it's called Nimrod. You see this very northern point up there on the map? That's where we live. It's a community that hasn't been evacuated. I'm happy we haven't been evacuated. We don't have safe rooms either. We don't have a school. Our school has been evacuated. Our kids go elsewhere. And I think that our strength is the most important thing. And Trumpeldor's line is the line that I am behind. Trumpeldor's plow had a line. But I want to talk about this. It's 4 comedic points. The first thing I want to talk about is that the Upper Galilee was in a bad state, but it's still not back on track because the improvement is just quantitative and it doesn't touch upon the core of the problems. And we're going to have to speak very quickly, but let me talk about 4 points because they're important. The first is the matter of periphery and border. In the past, the border had some depth. Now, the fence is the only border. That's what we feel. We see this and we talk about lines. The events of October 7th have proven to us that the road between the outpost of the soldiers and the community is just as vulnerable. We have many solutions to offer. Of course, if we talk about the military, we have to expand the line between the communities. We have to make the rapid response units bigger, increase them substantially. But how do we do that? Well, 50% of the communities are comprised of women. Why are they not part of the rapid response unit? And I'm telling you because I'm the only female coordinator, civil security coordinator, for the last 25 years. A woman sometimes comes and does something a little and then leaves again because we only, in the IDF, female soldiers, even if they have the capabilities, will only have a certain level of weapon experience. And if we give more weapon experience to women in the army, we'll have more security officials in these communities. So many things, so all these things have many solutions. So home front and front. The home front has a commander, right? A major general. And what do the area defense have? A brigadier general. And why? They have so many units under them, and I feel the same way. We belong to the same corps. What does it mean? That the weight between home front and fighting front has become reversed for us. And I don't want to blame anyone. I'm part of the system. But it's been reversed. And why? Why does it have such implications? Because there is no fighting front or home front in Metula, Dovev, in Idmit. They're all fighting front. Everyone can tell you the story. Tali also didn't believe that the home front command will come and give her care packages and food. And that's what I'm saying. We have to stop talking about home front. A home front is in Bat Yam and in Gedera. Whoever lives on the border is a fighting front, and that's what we have to talk about. And I can give you operative ideas, but we need to control what's happening. We can't wait for anyone to come and save us. And the second thing is relying on intelligence. Here again, there's no change. Again, we see the plans, the whole area will be full of units, people will come in, people will intervene, but forget it. They're not going to come. You have to give out weapons to the communities. Why not? Give the communities weapons. They'll be the first responders and they'll fight because it's their homes they're fighting for. And we all know that. And the last thing I want to talk about is the matter that we, whether civilians or soldiers, were not part of the army, but we feel like we're their clients, the army's clients. They're like a defense, a security company. It's made us feel distrust. It's made us become ineffective. And the most important thing is that the army is losing. And what's the idea of losing? Not a single farmer up north doesn't come to the fence every day and an intelligence officer can compete with. Changes on the ground is in our hands. Understanding what's happening on the ground is in our hands. It's just one mechanism out of countless mechanisms. And I don't want to say that as part of being an area defense officer, I had to wait for a tractor to move. Well, we have a farmer. The farmer can help, can move all the rocks, can move everything that's in my way and solve it. And by the way, I did that, but don't tell anyone because it goes against orders. And the last thing is, so that we really will have a last point to talk about, after we really relied on the government and the IDF, I want to tell you something. At the end of the day, it is our country. It is us. And whenever we say the Israel or the IDF or the government, we'll have a problem. And I don't want to reprimand anyone. I'm saying this to myself first and foremost. This is how I live my life. And I want to say that it is our initiative. It is in our hands. We mustn't always be dependent upon what someone is saying and what someone will do. And therefore, I'm giving you a quote in June 1967, before the Golan Heights were occupied, were taken over. If you remember, if you're my age, Levi Eshkol, the Prime Minister, Dayan, the Minister of Defense, did not want to invade the Golan Heights, but Eshkol wanted to. Why? Because we had a water problem. I don't want to go into that. But he kind of ambushed Dayan, and in a defense minister meeting, he brought 3 residents of the Galilee to talk to Dayan and tell him to take over the Golan Heights. And this was on June 8th, 1967. We had already taken over many areas, and what was left is the Golan Heights. And I will quote Shalom Chavlin from Kibbutz HaGoshrim. "Forgive me for my appearance," he said to the ministers and Prime Minister and Minister of Defense. "Excuse me for my appearance. I just came out of my point. I've been living in the Galilee for 34 years. My fate is the Galilee's fate. My sons were born there, my grandchildren were born there. And we want to live just like everyone else in Israel. We want to live and to thrive. We don't always want to bow our heads. We live and experience the ongoing threat of the enemy that is constantly on the mountains threatening us. And we know that if we, with our own hands, do not remove this threat, the, at this opportunity, we will not have another opportunity to do so. My son has been fighting in Sinai. My other son has been injured by a mortar shell. I'm always in my position, and my kids are in the shelter. Please help us. Take us out of this nightmare. We residents of the Galilee can no longer bear it. We are willing to fight together with the IDF on the front lines if there's if need be. And I served for 7 years on the Palmach. I'm experienced in combat. I'm willing to help wherever needed. But it is your call. You are our elected officials. Please think of us. Please allow us to live. So if you think this is now more relevant than ever, then it is. And finally, to wrap up, yes, Avram, to wrap up, I just want to tell you there's not going to be a magic solution. No genius is going to stand up and suddenly say what we can do. We have been in a war of attrition since 1948, and we are living in border communities. And this is just like a big brawl, and the last one standing, there's the last one standing, and despite all the bad things that are happening, we have to be the ones to live, and we have to be the ones to win. But we're here, and we're here to stay. Thank you very much.
In English, that's already on air, and in Hebrew, that will be later. That is as in my capacity as the media department. Gidi, you're going to be the final one on this panel. Gidi is a relatively new guest at Alma. He's 67 years old. He lives in Shar Yeshuv. He's a former lieutenant colonel, senior officer in 504, and he's now the head of the community emergency team. Gidi, the floor is yours. Hi, everybody. Hello. Thank you for the invitation to be here. I would very much like to pick up where Lilach left off, really in the context of how to conduct ourselves, how does the country, the state, how does the military, all the other organizations conduct themselves vis-a-vis the confrontation line communities. In the north, it is disgraceful. By the way, 3 brigadier generals that did us a favor and visited us last week heard this from me in the presence of many others in those very words. But because I don't have much time, it is very important for me to represent the matter for which I was called here, the matter of the community emergency teams. Anybody who you ask what is a community emergency team will say, I don't know, because the definition is not the same when you ask different people. I've also met senior officers in the army. They asked me, why do you even need this entity? Before the war, they asked this. During the war, they asked this. What is this community emergency team? So I'm the head of this team in Shar Yeshuv since the summer of 2013. And before that, I was deputy head of that team during COVID. On the map, I'm more familiar with the red than the blue. I served in Lebanon for 12 consecutive years as part of my service in 504 and in Shar Yeshuv, and I was not born there in that place. I knew about 5 people, no more. Now I am very familiar with the place. I know all the homes, all the houses, and who lives where. I know all the more or less interesting stories about people in that community. And I'd like to say one word that will maybe summarize everything before I begin. In my opinion, the community emergency team is the most important organizational structure in the communities, whether we're talking about kibbutzim, moshavim, or cities, in the confrontation line, in order to manage the population and the emergency routine during events of war, but not only then. When I was appointed as head of the emergency team, I set out for myself three scenarios. And if you think that I drafted the war scenario before the war, well, I have witnesses that will say otherwise, not just my wife, who is here with us today. I talk about three scenarios. One is an earthquake. We are located in a place that is included in the statistics of one serious earthquake every 100 years. We have to prepare for this. It is very significant, as significant as war in terms of what the emergency services have to prepare for and the population has to prepare for. Very significant, but unfortunately, very little has been done in this regard. Next, war in the northern front that includes massive conquering by Hezbollah. I hope some of you saw the video clip that you can find in Alma, that ad that they published about 5 or 6 years ago about conquering the Galilee. The writing was on the wall. And if you ask my mother-in-law, I always said to her, she lives in Misgav, I said to her, Grandma Ariela, you should have a bag ready because it might be that I have to pick you up after I give you only 1 hour warning. She thought I was kidding, but in the end, this happened. And the third matter is summer fires that is relevant to almost all of the communities in the area and mainly to us because we live in the Banyas Valley, and that is a threat that threatens all the houses in the community on a yearly basis. These are the three things I addressed when I was preparing the community emergency team. The most sensitive, problematic issue is treating the residents. First of all, you have to establish trust. The population needs to believe that somebody really wants their best interests and sits in the same place as they do. That is challenge number one. Next is preparing the community on the level of the population and establishment of infrastructures that can address the threat scenarios. That's to do with firefighting and with medical services and capabilities of managing a population. That is a critical matter in all of the communities, both evacuated and non-evacuated communities. It is relevant to kibbutzim and to moshavim, even though each place has its own nuances. But generally speaking, there are common shared issues. And of course, there is the matter of recruiting volunteers for the emergency team. And that is always true. Out of 100% population, at best, you can have about 15% volunteering, and they volunteer everywhere. They volunteer in the emergency team and also in the rapid response teams and also in the local policing traffic work that they do. And they are also medics. So this is all the same 15%, and therefore our volunteer reserve is problematic. During the event, the matter of spokesmanship and contact with the population is critical. That is something that the community emergency team handles more or less successfully. Also, the keeping of the communities, if they stay in the evacuated community, that includes the elderly, that includes the farmers. They want to stay. Nobody will tell them to leave their homes. Nobody will tell them not to do their agricultural work. It's pointless. I understand that they're there, so I try to make their lives easier and take care of them in terms of security. But there's also weakened and elderly population who think that it's good for their children to grow up with the cannons and the shells in their surroundings. All of these people deserve to be taken care of. Also, a next issue is maintaining contact with the evacuated population, visiting hotels, calling them by telephone. Only a small percentage, not only in Shar Yishuv, went to hotels. Others went left independently. Like, for example, our colleague here from Idmit. We provide solutions to do with resilience and with housing and with employment issues. Sometimes employers have to understand how they need to treat their employees. We do that, and we also help the needy in the community. We provide food. Some people have emotional issues. There is also the matter of monitoring and reporting about the population and reporting to the Homefront Command. And we also train teams and we prepare the infrastructures, and this did not exist before the war. Because I don't have a lot of time and I do have a lot to say, and I could actually speak here without stopping about the emergency teams and about the rapid response teams. There is bad things that I can say about the country and what it does or doesn't do, and I can say wonderful things about the population and the residents. But there are things that we need to talk about now. Before the war ends, we have to see who the emergency team reports to. Right now, it's the welfare ministry that doesn't even know that we are subject to them. And there is also the social worker in the council who is in charge of the emergency team. And that is correct for everybody. But the reason it's this way, it's because they think that's all they deal with, resilience of the residents. That's why it's a social worker. The emergency team also does not get any budgets. Everything we have and we use is from donations. Nothing comes from earmarked money. And also the matter of recruiting the volunteers of the emergency team using Order 8 that are the emergency recruitment orders. We need to be able to do that for our volunteers, because what happened is that within 48 hours, the only people left was myself and my deputy. Everybody else was called up to serve in the military. And that's what happens, because if I have younger people or young mothers, especially on my team, I completely understand. It is clear to me where their priorities lie. I'm not complaining. That is the reality. But I need people, and that is, in a nutshell, what I wanted to say to you. Thank you very much. Like I said when I opened, we're not going to do the Q&A now. We had more panelists and also we're about 10 minutes late. So we're not going to postpone lunch, but I'd like us to stick to the timetables. So I will see you later. Thank you.